I'm going to record this, and then we're going to see how we go. Right. Thank you very much for joining me, everyone. I'll turn these lights off. There we go. Can we see that okay?
Yeah, right.
Brilliant. Hopefully. Right. So, Lammas is what we're talking about tonight. Okay. So, as we move into the month of the long grass, Vedamonth, as they would have called it, or the weed month. But weed to them meant the grasses and the grains, not weeds as we would say today. And the days grow shorter. It's time to tell the stories of the old gods, the spirits, and of times long past. Let's celebrate the bounty of the Hooam Haavest. Now, this time of the year was very, very important because, as I say, it was the bounty. Now, we don't think of autumn starting until a bit later. But it was the 7th of August used to be the official start of autumn. And Lammas Day, the first day of August, was the beginning of what was called the first harvest. And it's been said that Lammas is the hinge that the year turns upon. Because everything started around this time. Now we think of the year starting in January. We think of it in terms of that 12-month cycle of winter to winter. But just think about what the harvest meant to people. This was a time of bounty. So why wouldn't it be the start of the year? Why wouldn't it be where the year turns? Why wouldn't it be where we start? We start with our most productive and most important part of the year. So what are we talking about tonight? Tonight, we're going to talk about what is Lammas. Then we're going to talk about the Vedamonth. We're going to talk about the charms of the harvest. We're going to be talking about St. Urian. We're going to be talking about the Hlufwerd. We're going to be talking about the fox moon. And we're going to be talking about the Hooam Haavest. What do all these words mean? So I'll explain what Lammas is shortly. I've already explained about the Vedamonth, the charms of the harvest, because this was so important. And regardless of what people believed, charms and magic were still so very much a part of the farming experience. Even as Christianity became the predominant faith within Britain and the island, but also even up until modern days, those little charms and those little spells that we said, I mean, even reciting little good luck charms still have their roots in this. St. Urian, we're going to talk about the story of St. Urian and St. Urian's first miracle. It was supposed to have happened this week on the 7th of August. Hlufwerd, what does that mean? Hluf is the Old English for loaf or bread. Hlufwerd, the warden of the loaf, the bringer of the loaves. That is the root of the word Lord. The word Lord that we have today comes from Hlufwerd. The fox moon, we'll talk about that in a minute. The very first full moon of August. And lastly, the Hooam Haavest. What's Lammas? In the words of the Old English writers, and after the feast of St. James, after 7 nights of summer brightness, month of long grass slips into the dwellings everywhere. Wait a month. So that little thing that looks like a P is pronounced a W. Wait a month. That's the Old English word. Brings to all peoples Hlufmustag, or the Blessed Bread Day, Day of the Blessed Bread. Bread, hluf, mass, blessed, doig, day. So the harvest comes after that number of nights, but on bright, laden with fruits, plenty is revealed, beautiful upon the earth. I love this drawing. I don't know who drew it. It's the person, whoever drew it, lost their time. I just think it's so expressive. 2 people there getting the hay in, 2 people in behind canoodling, and judgmental son up there, watching up there.
Taking more time over the sun than the rest of the people put together. It's a lovely picture.
I think it sums this time of year up. We have the long shadows that we're getting. We have the long grass. We have a judgmental sun. But we have this freshness. The thing that I always think about this time of year is the fragrance in the air, the smells. Everywhere you go, there's the smell of something. Whether it be the fruits, whether it be corn in the fields or wheat, as we call it now. Whether it be the hay drying. Whether it be the stalks that are left over, or the husks. When they you still see it now. You see the husks in the field from that have been shucked from the wheat. And that all has that distinct harvesty smell. Even the earth, I think, has a deep resonance and smell to it. Go walking through any woodland, and every so often you get those smells of all sorts of fruits, apples, plums, truffles, amazing. That's one of those explosive smells. Just the smell of truffles, like blowing your brains out. It's just incredible. And this time of year is just filled with it. And there's a number of reasons for that. And if we look at it from a purely scientific point of view, the reason that this time of year is so filled with smells, not only because of the fruits, but also the heat. So the heat and the humidity in the air. So those particulates, they get dissolved into the moisture in the air, and the heat, and so we breathe that in, and it's very easy for us to have that. But just imagine what it was like for these people, walking around and just being hit with these heady smells. Walking down a laneway filled with blackberries. I've always thought there are 2 types of blackberries out there. You get those ones that are very sour, but then you get the really fragrant ones, those juicy, fragrant, perfumed, and you take those. And whenever I find those, it's like being just thrown back to my childhood. And our brains are wired that way. And that's why this time of year is so visceral. But also why the deep magics that people believed in were so powerful. Because we're building up all these bits and pieces that are going to keep us going through the darkness that is coming. Everyone knew what was coming. Everyone knew just over the hill there is the winter, is the darkness, is the cold, is the barrenness. So what did they do? They did everything they could to get as much in. They would get the blackberries in, and they would preserve those blackberries. Before sugar was easy to come by, they'd preserve it in honey, or they'd turn it into wine. They'd mix it with cider. They'd mix it with apples. They'd do everything they could to preserve these things, to get you through. So all through hedgerow is a bounty. And we'll get on to, when we get to the charms a bit later on, we'll talk about the 9 holy herbs. The 9 holy herb charm. And we're not going to go through all of them. There's only 2 or 3 that I've brought up here. But these are the things that as you walk through the world, you would find. And I heard earlier, they were talking about chamomile. You know, who hasn't been out walking and then just been hit with that wall of smelling chamomile? Last year, year before, in the height of the pandemic, my family and I just found a completely deserted field, a completely deserted place, and we went for a walk. And as we did, and it was about this time, and the thing I remember, everywhere we went, grasshoppers, jumping grasshoppers. The grass was up to here on me. You know, it was taller than my daughter. And then all of a sudden, it all sort of tapered away. And there were those beautiful yellow flowers and that wall of chamomile. Visceral. I remember every moment of it. And my children, my daughter, who was 2 at the time, still remembers the grasshoppers, and she still remembers the smell.
Can I just say, it mentions the Feast of St. James.
Yes.
Obviously, there seems to be a melding of, you know, the Christianity and the old beliefs.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, these beliefs, the Lammas, I mean, that goes back well before Christianity. And yes, the melding of these 2 beliefs is I mean, we have a long tradition in this country of absorbing stuff, right? And making it our own. What's the number one food? What's our number one meal? What's our number one takeout? Curry, right? A long tradition. And of course, when Christianity came to this country, of course they merged it in. And of course they didn't let go. Particularly on the island, we didn't let go of our traditions. And if you look at it, we stayed distinctly pagan well after the rest of the country had turned. In fact, you were talking earlier about Arvold, our last king, our last pagan king. But even then, after Christianity became past, we hung on tight. Reformation came to this country. Protestantism swept through. The Isle of Wight became Protestant in name only. We hung on to those Catholic traditions and we hung on to those pagan beliefs. We hung on to Catholicism because it was 2 steps away from paganism. So yes, the merging of the Feast of St. James, absolutely. You're absolutely spot on. It is the merging of the old. I think that's a wonderful thing, that pulling these things in. Wait a month. What does that mean? Weed month, or the month of long grass. So this is an extract from the 9 holy herb charm. These 9 have power against 9 venoms. Wyrm came sneaking. It slit a man, then took up Woden 9 glory times, slew with them the adder that she into 9 flew. There earned fruit and venom, and she never would bend way into house. What does that mean? I know that sounds really convoluted and difficult to understand. But what does that mean? 9 have power against the 9 venoms. These 9 holy herbs, and when we say herbs, we're talking vegetables and things like that, These have power. And at this time of the year, that power is at its height. These 9 have power against the 9 venoms, the 9 sicknesses, the things that crept and crawled, the adders, but also the poisons, the infections. These things have those power. The Hooam came sneaking, so the snake came sneaking. It slit a man, bit the man, then took up Woden 9 glory times. So, Woden, this shows us as this predates Christianity. So what's it saying here? So the number 9 continually comes through. And basically talking that by using Woden's magic, we were able to slay the poison, with them the adder that she into 9 flew. One of the 9 poisons, the adder, was taken away. And she never would bend way into the house. Bend way, slither. That's what the way they described, that's how they said the adder moved. It was a bend way. I think it's beautiful and such a beautiful word. So words have meaning, words have power, and the food of this time have power. So charms of the first harvest. And this is really, really important. Again, this is the merging of 2 beliefs, the merging of Christianity and the merging of the belief in magic. Now, if we were to take the time to drill into this, we could probably find the root of this. What does it mean? Long pieces of 4-edged wood, and on each piece write a paternoster, on each side down to the end. Lay one on the floor of the barn and lay the other across it, so that they form a sign of the cross. Take 4 pieces of the hallowed bread, which we will talk about very soon, because I have, as a special treat for everyone, the hallowed bread for everyone to try. Take 4 pieces of the hallowed bread, which is blessed on Lammas day, and crumble them at the 4 corners of the barn. This is the blessing for that, so that the mice do not harm these sheaves. Say prayers over the sheaves and do not cease from saying them. City of Jerusalem, where mice do not live, they cannot have power, and cannot gather the grain, nor rejoice with the harvest. This is the second blessing. Lord God Almighty, who made heaven and earth, bless these fruits in the name of the Father and the Holy Spirit. Amen. And then say the paternoster. And then say a paternoster.
Which is Catholic, isn't
It is. Absolutely it is.
I thought that was a copying machine.
It is not a copying machine.
There was something called a paternoster that was a photocopying machine.
Was there?
Really?
That would be before my time. Maybe named after the same thing.
Before mine, but
So what do we have here? Very, very Christian. Absolutely. But the rituals that this is talking about is very pagan.
Yeah.
Laying things at the four corners, very pagan. Think about the four corners of the earth. Think about north, east, south, west. Okay.
12 then.
There were 12 stations of the cross. Yeah. But we're talking about these pieces of four-edged wood. Now that is a clue, because they would write on four-edged wood, the Anglo-Saxons, in runes, and they would write their spells upon four-edged wood.
So we're talking about,
Wait, 2 by 2.
Yeah, well, a piece of wood like this, sort
Yeah.
of about that long.
it's not
Like a
round.
fence.
It's not round, it's squared
Yeah.
off. Yeah, and then they would write on it. And that's what they're talking about right here. They're talking about the old traditions, but then just supplanting what would have been a spell with a Christian rite. But they're effectively doing the same thing. They're writing a spell, but in a Christian context. So these charms were very powerful and very important, because there's no point in going out into the harvest, getting all your grain in and having these bloomin' mice coming to eat it all, right?
This was before staddle stones, obviously.
Obviously.
I do love a staddle stone. They're those sort of mushroom stone ones that your barns were then sat on.
Yeah.
To
And
stop
they
the mice going up
yeah.
underneath.
Stop the mice and snakes getting in.
Yeah.
'Cause
Is
they-
Lammas a particularly island word, or is it?
No, it's an old English word. It
Yeah.
so, as I said, it comes from the time of the blessed bread. So, basically, you take the first corn or the first wheat, and you bake bread from it, and it was seen as powerful, and it was seen as magical. I mean, the whole process of creating bread is magical, right? It's a magic process.
See it rise.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like magic, isn't
It is magic. Absolutely is magic. And that's what we're talking about here. So over the time, that became shortened to Lammas. A bit later on, the Protestants tried to kind of reclaim that and tried to say it meant lamb mass. But that makes no sense, because there's no lambing at this time of year. So, but, that's kind of where it went.
So what century is this?
This here, this is around about the 9th century, so well into the Christian period of the Anglo-Saxons, that this particular writing comes from. But there is just this undercurrent of the old traditions there. There's something else going on there. 9 herbs charm, the holy herbs. So I've only taken 2 extracts. Remember mugwort, what was declared, what is advised at the proclamation of the gods, plural, una, thou were named. First, basically, the first. You are the first of these holy, sacred, magical things. The eldest of the herbs. You have might against 3 and against 30. Basically, you are the strongest. You're the number one. You are strong against 3. You're as strong against 3 as you are against 30. Okay? You have might against venom and against that which flies. Demons, spirits. You have might against the loathsome that journey to other lands. Okay? So you have power over imps, you have power over, but not only that, you have power over the people that have been put into exile, the traitors, the cowards. You have power over that. So let's just take that for a second and just think about that. These holy magical herbs that are about curing disease and poisons, but also have the power to keep away those loathsome things, including people that you don't want around. So what are we talking about there? We're talking about curses as well, right? And that just shows you the duality of things. Mugwort. This time of year in August, mugwort is at its bloom. This is the time when they would be getting it, and they would be drying it, and they would be really, really important. Tastes terrible, but really good for you. Let's go on to the next one. And you, whey bread, what we call plantain. Does everyone know what plantain is?
Is it the one that you can flip?
Yep. So you see them on the side of the road. They've got the little heads on them.
Brown heads.
The sort of long, spindly, and then a little head at the top. They're everywhere, always, and you always see them on the side of the road. Now, plantain is really important. We'll get to that in a minute. Mother of herbs. I don't know why I put a B in there. There's always a spelling mistake. Mother of herbs. Okay, so we have here, interestingly, Una, thou were named the eldest of herbs. Right? So mugwort is the eldest, but whey bread, or plantain, is the mother of herbs. Open to the east, mighty within. Open to the east. Where does the sun come up? The sun comes up to the east. The mother, the beginning. Mighty within. You can't kill this plant.
You can't.
Right? It will grow everywhere. Find a crack in concrete, it will grow. Over thee carts creaked, and over thee Queen's Road. Basically, carts, royals, people, they drive over it every day, but you can't kill it. Over thee brides cried out, over thee bulls snorted. Cattle walk on it. New brides walking by. All of them you withstood and dashed against. And that's the key part. Because you withstand them. That's how strong you are. So may you withstand venom and that which flies. Again, we're seeing the link here between the two. And the loathsome that journey to other lands.
Could that also be like invaders? Like
Invaders?
the Vikings or whatever?
Yep. Yeah.
The loathsome.
Yep. Again, the duality here we have something that will protect you from poison, will nourish you, but when used the right way with the right spells, you get a curse. These have power, and the most powerful point and the most powerful time is now, in August. I'm keeping an eye on the time. The first harvest. Now, what does this all mean, and how does this all come together? Let's talk about St. Urian. Artwork by me, I drew that. St. Urian, who's St. Urian? Well, there's a number of theories, and we were actually talking about St. Urian downstairs. Number of theories. I like to go with this story. This story was told to me when I was very young. And this story was told to me by both my grandmothers. And they swore that this was the story of St. Urian, the first of St. Urian's miracles. Now they say St. Urian was a woman. She was a she. 7th of August, the beginning of the old autumn. So Centurion, or Urian as she was walking through the woodland of the wolves before anyone lived there, when it was nothing more than a dense wooded area. She was taking that road to come through from one side of the first island across so that she could get through Brading Haven into Brading. And as she walked through this track on this hot, dusty autumn day, she met a great adder. Centurion was pious. She was a virgin. She was stoic. And she met this great adder. And the great adder saw how pious she was. And he said, "Why? Why are you like this? God doesn't exist. When you die, you die. There's nothing going to be left. Why be like this when you can have whatever you want? You're beautiful. You're smart. You're strong. Why deny yourself?" She didn't listen to him. She walked on. So this riled up the adder. So the adder curled himself around her so she couldn't move, held him tight. Held her tight, I should say. And he whispered in her ear, "Why? Why are you like this? You can have anything you want. You could have anyone you want. You are denying yourself." And still, she ignored him. She turned to him eventually and said, "You're just lying to me. Like all snakes, you are lying to me." This enraged the adder. And he bit her deeply and injected the venom into her. And she started to fall. He released her and she fell to the ground. And as she fell, she saw the plantain on the side of the road. She reached out and she prayed. And she prayed for deliverance. And more importantly, she prayed for the soul of the adder. She took the plantain, she chewed the plantain, and magically the venom was swept away. And all that time she kept praying for the soul of the adder. And this sent the adder into an absolute tailspin of a rage, to the point where it stripped away his outer skin and showed him for who he truly was, which was a demon of temptation. She stood up. She pulled the plantain out of the earth by the roots. And as she did, the earth opened up and swallowed up the demon. She threw the plantain in. And as she did, the most pure water bubbled up. And from there, the holy spring of St. Urian was born. In Centurion's Copse. Many years later, people settled there, and the story remained. They built the church, and we know what happened. And that's the first miracle of Centurion. There is a second story about Centurion, which is her death. but that's later on down in the year. And we'll talk about that when we talk about the Christmas traditions. So that's the story of the miracle of St. Urian, which happened on the 7th of August. Let's talk about Hooam. So I'm going to let you guys have a bit of a taste of this. It's got...
I have to ask, has it got any gluten in it?
there is no gluten in that. There is.
Lovely, thank you. What is in it then?
There is there's a bunch of grains. There is oats in it. There is there is nuts. We don't have any rats today. There is oats. There is flax. There is linseed. There is a wholemeal type flour in there. Very, it's not wheat. It's barley.
Oh, barley.
Yeah.
Oh, well, we'll see.
It should be okay. I mean, there's no gluten. You can tell by the hardness of it. There's no the gluten proteins haven't been.
We'll see.
Is this what we had at the solstice?
Yes. Oh, it's slightly different. It has prunes in it. It has figs, and it has apple.
I can taste the apple.
Have to give us the recipe.
I will. Yes. In fact, there's a video. I did a video on the one that we had at Solstice, and I will do the recipe. It's very similar. The difference with this is there is no wheat flour in it. So this one is oats and that sort of stuff. But
Thank you very much.
you are more than welcome.
Nourishing, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and this is this is one of the celebration breads that they would have had. Oh, there's seeds in there as well. There's I didn't have any nuts. Normally you put nuts in the
Wash them
reservoir.
all down together then? Do they come as flour?
I'd like to say that I did, but I actually used a food processor.
Modern version.
Yeah, I did cheat. I have to say, and it's made with a beer discard as the yeast. Homebrew. No, not beer. Sorry, cider. So from my cider, I've got a cider discard that I use to make my ciders every year, and that goes into there as well. There we go. Help yourself if you want more. There's plenty here. Let's talk about the Hooam. Again, my drawing. If you can't tell, all my drawings are kind of like this. So, let's just talk a little bit about the symbolism of the drawing. We have the fox, symbolizing the fox moon, which we'll talk about soon. We have the Hooam. They're presenting the loaf, the holy loaf, and then the grains all around him. So, as I said, Hooam is the root of our word Lord. And this character is one of the, and I've spoken about unverified personal gnosis before in the past. And as I always say, nothing is made up, just remembered differently.
So would he be a local farmer or the miller or anybody like that?
So I like to think that he'd probably be a local miller maybe, or maybe the local bread baker, or maybe someone like that. And I like to think, there is no actual folklore around this person or this character, but I just find it an inspiring word and an inspiring idea. So where did that come from? If there wasn't something, why would that word exist?
Yeah.
Maybe he was just the head of the household,
And maybe he
the
was.
gatherer of the food.
And maybe he was.
Maybe he was just the daddy.
Maybe that was just that. Maybe that's where it comes from. I don't know. I know that it's the root of Lord, and the root of lady is roughly translated the kneader of bread. So I think you might be on the right track.
In my head, he's just the daddy of the family.
But it's so important, right? I think at this time of year, and it's always talking about this unverified personal gnosis. This is one of these things that has spoken to me. They said at this time of the year we have the blessed bread, we have that, and we have this word, and we have this person, and I just think and feel, and as I said in the talk I did about magic and unverified personal gnosis, it's all about that feeling, and what makes something real is what we feel, right?
I was just thinking, now we have a modern equivalent, the master baker.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering whether if the bread had a ritual significance or holy significance, or whatever,
Absolutely
the
did.
person would have been a master of some, like our equivalent of a master baker or a,
And I think that's really great as well. That's a really great idea, because as we said early on, what's more magical than the creation of bread?
yeah.
Creation of beer.
It's the same. It's a very deeply related magic, isn't it?
It is.
It is the transformation of something into something. It is, it's as magical as any sort of transformation. It's as magical as metallurgy. The person who could make bronze, transforming two things into this magical thing. I think that's just bread, beer, cider, mead, all that stuff is just a magical thing. And this time of the year, and I keep coming back to it, why is this part of the year so filled with that magic? And it's because we have this bounty of stuff. This is where all this stuff gets created. In a few weeks' time, we're going to be picking up the apples to make cider. We'll be creating beer. We'll be doing all this stuff because we have all these magical ingredients. And it's as magical as going to church and transubstantiation, because that's what we're talking about here. Turning the bread into Jesus's body, turning the wine into his blood. This is just as magical as that, is it not? So that's why we've got him here. I've got no stories to tell, but maybe by this time next year I will. We'll see, shall we? The fox moon and autumn lady's tresses. Who knows what autumn lady's tresses is? One of the most beautiful and rare orchids is autumn lady's tresses. And
I think that was what we saw up on the Brading Downs.
more than likely.
Remember I stopped and
You
showed
did,
you.
you did, you showed
They're in.
Is that what it is?
No. They're only about that big.
Ah, okay.
Really, really tiny. One of the things, and we'll talk about the fox moon in a minute, but let's talk about autumn ladies' tresses. Very rare, very beautiful, and represents the weird. And I've talked about the weird before, the divine will. It's got that spiral that goes on forever. On the left-hand side, you can see I've got the Isle of Wight wand, that ancient wand that was found.
Oh, yeah.
And you see the inscription there. And to me, that's the same thing.
Yeah.
I think that magic is deep, deeply ingrained in this island, deeply attached to the weird. And this time of year is when it starts to flower. It will be in full bloom this week and next week. There are a few places in Braiding Down, also Five Barrows. You can also find it there. And if you do come across it, admire it, take a photo, and leave it. Because it is so very rare. And there's a reason that you can't buy it, you can't get seeds for it, is because it will not grow in someone's greenhouse. It won't grow in captivity. They believed that you could make a poultice out of its root and it would give you sight.
Second sight, you mean, or
Well, it would both restore your sight and give you second sight. There's more than likely a powerful toxin in there that probably does give you hallucinations. But please, even if you want to try it out, leave them, I beg, if you do come across them. They are my absolute favorite thing. And as I said, I think that's deeply rooted. And again, we're going back to unverified personal gnosis here. I have no proof of that. But to me, it is true. To me, it is my truth. So let's talk about the fox moon. Let's talk about how it relates to autumn ladies' tresses. Who's heard of the Fox King? Very, very old story. The Fox King is one of those characters that I've not heard about anywhere other than here on the island. Again, something that was told to me by my grandparents. The Fox King is said to inspire, and to those that the Fox King appears, will not tell you the future, but will give you the wisdom to maybe glimpse the future. The first full moon of August is called the fox moon. The fox moon is said to represent, have a guess. Divination. To me, it all seems to fall into place.
As in finding water divination, or
Well, divining water has its root in divination, as in to see the future. To divine something is to sense it
yeah,
and to bring it forward. So the modern way of describing divining water, they would call it dowsing.
yeah.
But the old term was divining.
showing my age now.
No, you're using the right term. Absolutely, you should be using that term. And it's all the same. And the Fox King says that the weird is like a river. And when you're in it, which we all are, you can see very clearly what's right in front of you. But go a little bit further downstream and you lose sight very quickly. It pivots and it turns. It splits. It speeds up and it slows down. And that's the weird. So the Fox King says, you can try and look into the future, but seeing into the future, only the person who can remember what is going to happen is a true diviner. Have you ever met anyone who can remember the future?
Only in a dream.
Maybe that's when the fox...
Does that count?
Deja
Sorry?
vu.
Deja vu, does that count?
Yeah, no,
I don't know,
So
maybe.
sometimes now I'm always worried it might be that I looked on Google Earth
Yeah, I know.
and I think, oh, I've been here before. Yes, on Google Earth.
Well,
2 months
as
before we went on holiday.
as I said to you downstairs, either all of it is true or none of it. And what did I say to you, I believe? I believe it is all true. So, Autumn Lady's Tresses, the Fox Moon, the Fox King, I believe...
So are they
they're-
one of the 9 herbs that you brought?
No, they're not.
Oh, right.
They're not. But I brought it in because this month is when they flower. Right now is when they're going to be in bloom. I took that photo on the 7th of August last year. So there we go. Whenever I find them, I take photos because I just absolutely adore it. Let's move forward a little bit in time. Let's move to the Hooam Haavest, or the Hooam Haavest, as we would say now. Sometimes the Haavest is written Harvest, as in harvest. Sometimes it's written Haavest. But I like to go with Haavest. In days gone by, on the 7th of August, the first harvest was started. And that's where we're coming into now. That's what we're talking about tonight. When finished, the first of the Hooam Havests was celebrated. The Hooam Haavest King and Queen were selected and reigned until the harvest moon in September. So the first moon, or the first full moon in September, is called the harvest moon, which heralds in the second harvest. Now this tradition has been gone many, many years. But how much fun would it be if we could bring something like this back? Could you imagine a cleared field, people sitting around dancing and singing, and then the king and queen being crowned?
Might have something to do with our carnival.
That's just what I was thinking.
Because it's carnival season, isn't it?
Thought to be a week later.
It's probably very much related.
must be, yeah,
Probably.
Carnival Queen.
What the Hooam Haavest King and Queen got, I have no idea. But what I can tell you is, come the harvest moon, they lost their powers and they conceded to the Meester of Mischief. And the Meester of Mischief reigned until All Hallowtide. And he could do what he liked, or he or she could do what they liked, I guess within reason. And they played tricks. I suspect the king and queen, though, of the Hooam Haavest was much more wholesome. Now I read by the 1800s, the first harvest, the first Hooam Haavest, was seen as a little bit too pagan and a little bit too old-fashioned. So it was already on the way out by then. But we have some writings about it. The last load of corn was adorned with a floral wreath, and a puncheon of Nammet beer was drunk before setting off to the ricks. The harvesters came to the supper straight from the fields, and the meester, or the lord, or the farmer, carved a large leg of mutton or ham, and they ate mutts on pies or a chine, followed by a huge plum pudding and even larger apple pies.
Sounds good to me.
That sounds amazing, right?
What are you eating when you're eating a chine?
Really good question. Anyone want to have a crack at what that might be? Anyone? No? A chine is what we'd probably call a doorstop sandwich.
Oh, right.
Basically a big old chunk of bread.
Yeah.
You know? I think that sounds like an amazing time. And I really like this picture. I love the idea of guys up in the tree playing flutes and things and just dancing around. And
It's a very Cornish word.
it's also an Isle of Wight
Isle of Wight
word.
word as well,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. So anyone want to have a crack at what the Nammet beer is?
Wheat beer.
It is a wheat beer.
Have it with your nammy for lunch.
Your lunch. That's what you have with your lunch.
Nammies, no meat.
No meat.
No meat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So farmers. lunch.
Yep.
Farmers
Wheat
lunch.
beer.
No,
Yep.
So you didn't get drunk because you wouldn't do anything.
Didn't get drunk. But also the water might not be good enough to keep you healthy.
That is true. But I think they probably would have got a little bit of a buzz out of it.
Otherwise they wouldn't bother drinking it.
So I think that sounds pretty good. So what's a puncheon?
As in
Measure of beer.
measure, yeah, cup or
It is an unspecified large amount of beer. I love that. That's my favorite definition of anything. An unspecified large amount.
something like a punch bowl,
I was going to
where
say
you just throw
It may well be a punch bowl.
unspecified amount of alcohol pushed in it.
And isn't that a great word though? A puncheon of Nammet beer. So they drank a lot of it. How wonderful. I mean, that's just such a beautiful a description, isn't it? Adorned with a floral wreath. Tell me, if that doesn't scream paganism, what does?
Do you know about corn dollies?
Yep.
You make corn dollies.
Yep. There's a reason I haven't talked about corn dollies in this, is because everyone talks about them. So there's been a deliberate leaving those out. And because there's no record showing that it was an island tradition. Not to say that it wasn't, but I just love this. I love this description here.
You're into the Lammet beer in more detail.
Yeah. But I love the adorned with a floral wreath. So can you imagine? You know, we're talking carts of this stuff, and they put floral wreaths on top. Why did they do that?
It's a crown.
Yeah, a crown of protection, maybe. It has its roots somewhere.
Because you still
Just
get well
ornamentation,
dressings.
isn't it?
You still get the well dressings in places, don't you?
That's
Flowers.
true. Yep. Yeah.
Flowers
And the lucky trees.
Yep.
and
Yeah.
got its roots in the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
They took everything off it and to start again.
Fairy tree over
Oh.
where dunes.
Yeah.
So that brings us that brings us to the end of tonight.
Yeah.
And I just think that's just a wonderful way to sort of end things. So I have a dream to bring that back one day, because I think it would just be so much fun, right?
Plum puddings and the apple pies are likely to be more second harvest, though, aren't they?
Quite possibly, but maybe not.
Plums, less so the apples.
There are,
Almost gone.
yeah. Well, it does. I mean, it's hard to tell. But it may be the second harvest. But I still think it's just a wonderful description of an amazing thing, right?
Absolutely.
So once again, thank you very much for coming. I know we had a very small
That was good. They don't
Group
all
today?
listen, do they?
No, they don't. That's true.
Well, they might be on holiday, of course.
Yeah.
Well, that's more than
Children,
likely.
problems
Time of the
and
year.
grandchildren
Yeah.
issues.
So, like any questions, anything, any comments?
If we Googled the 9 herbs, would it come up relatively
Yep.
easily? Is that be interesting?
Well, finding a translated version might be difficult. Fortunately, I have already translated it, and I will be putting it online.
Okay, thank you.
On the Facebook page.
Yeah.
So I can't ask Alexa.
Well, you could try.